We're going to stack for lunch.
Take two. Okay, we're live. Coffee and Kabbalah, Parshas Vayakhel, take two, part two. Our first stream got disrupted, but I'm so happy that you're back with me now. And again, thank you to Deanna Rosenfelder, today's sponsor. This cheer is in memory and in schus of her father, Shlomo ben Aryeh. His neshama should have an aliyah, and we should be reunited with him very soon. Let's get right back in. Okay, now we're getting to the meat and bones of the parsha. Okay, so the parsha we said is the Moshe repeating all the instructions of how to build the Mishkan and the Kelim in these two parshas that end this Chumash, right? And Chumash Shemos. They're the last two parshas, which are seeming almost exact repetition of parshios Truma Tetzaveh, right? 3 and 2 parshios ago. Now, after Moshe gathers all the Jewish people together at the foot of the mountain, all the people waiting to see, what did God tell you, right? What is everything we need to do to build this home for Hashem? What do we got to do? Tell us. First, Moshe says, Sheishes Yamim Te'aseh Malacha, right? Suddenly he stops and he's like, first, I have to tell you another mitzvah. For 6 days, Te'aseh Malacha, B'yom HaShvi'i Yelachem Kodesh Shabbat Shabbaton Lashem. 6 days you do work, but on the 7th day, no more work. It's Shabbos. You have to stop everything you're doing. Anyone who does any work dies, right? They already know about Shabbos. So why is it coming into here, right? Because they already got the 10 Commandments. They know about Shabbos. Here it's coming to say, Rashi says that even though you're commanded to work, it doesn't push off Shabbos, right? Don't think that because the Mishkan is so important, we need to rush and build this beautiful home for Hashem, still you have to stop this work to keep Shabbos. Now, this is really interesting because then he starts and says, Lo Suvar Eish B'chol Mosheichem Yom Shabbos. And beside from this, one mitzvah that's specified in the Torah, the only thing that it says not to do on Shabbos, the malacha, right? It says don't do malacha. That's very vague. What is malacha, right? We're going to talk about that. Then it says lo Suvar Eish, not to burn a fire in your house throughout Shabbos, right? That's where no electricity on Shabbos comes from, right? Well, no lighting electricity that could be on, but it can't be turned on Shabbos. Now, the Chachamim want to know from this is the whole entire source of how we know what we can and cannot do on Shabbos, right? The Torah is pretty vague. It just says don't do malacha. What is malacha? Does it mean I can't move my couch, move my furniture? If I want to rearrange it, or if I want to move something over, if I want to, it's hard for me to set the table. That means I can't set the table on Shabbos, right? Malacha is like some things are just hard for me. So do I do that with taking a walk? What is constituted as malacha? So the Chachamim say that the juxtaposition of the Gemara and Gemara Shabbos, the whole Masechah Shabbos learns that what are the malachos that you can and cannot do on Shabbos? What is considered hard work? It's not what we would consider difficult because lighting a match is not hard. Right, but that's not allowed on Shabbos. But I could rearrange and move my furniture. When the shul was in this room, I would have to move all my couches and everything away to make space for a shul. That's allowed on Shabbos. But lighting a match, which is easy, is not, right? So what is malacha? So we have to learn that malacha is creative work. But still, we want to be very specific, right? Anything that is creating. And we learn from the Chachamim say that from the juxtaposition of the fact that Moshe is telling the people that here's what you have to do to build a Mishkan, but you can't do it on Shabbos. We learn that the acts that we're not allowed to do, that we cannot do on Shabbos, are the 39 constructive, creative works that were done to build the Mishkan. So we actually find out now that there's a lot of layers that Moshe now instructing all the Jewish people to build the Mishkan. It seems at first value just here's your instructions, what you got to do, but it is actually much more layered than that. On the first layer, it's the instructions of how to build the Mishkan and the details of what they need, the materials needed, and what needs to be made. On another layer, at the same time, it's also letting them know these are the things that you cannot do on Shabbos. All the things that you're going to need to build a Mishkan, lighting a fire, weaving, sewing, writing, erasing, burning things, winnowing, planting, right? Because a lot of the materials, right? Plant, all the things involved with planting, baking, cooking, because that's part of the Mishkan. All those things are not allowed to be done on Shabbos. So at the same time, we're learning also all the malachos that we cannot do on Shabbos as well. So it holds a lot of weight. And that's how we learn, where we learn all the things that we can't do on Shabbos are the malachos done in the Mishkan. And that's why some things that might seem laborious, thank you, are permitted on Shabbos because they're not creative acts. And all of these acts of building a Mishkan are actually acts of creation, something that's purposeful, something that creates something, like planting, sowing, harvesting, right? Watering plants, and all of those things. But other things like moving a couch, that's not creating something new. So we also learned that creating anything new is not allowed on Shabbos. Lighting a fire, even blowing a balloon, blowing bubbles, creating a nolad. Because what happened when Hashem made the world is that Hashem created for 6 days. So for 6 days we create, and on the 7th day we rest from creation and we enjoy what has been created. We're in the present moment and we're enjoying all the work that we're doing. Now, in this mitzvah, let's go back to Shabbos a little bit. In the construction, it could have just said, it didn't have to say, Sheishes Yamim Te'aseh Malacha. For 6 days work should be done, work will be done. And on the 7th day, it could have just said, on the 7th day you should stop doing the work. Why adding words? That's the Torah is so concise. Why add the words? It's obvious that if the seventh day you're not working, that when else are you going to do the work in the Mishkan the 6 other days, right? So it's actually an instruction for us that Shabbos is not just resting on the seventh day. Shabbos can really only come. It's an instruction, it's a mitzvah or an instruction in and of itself that for the other 6 days that aren't Shabbos, you need to work. You can't just live a life of Shabbos all week long. Somebody who thinks that life can be lived always Shabbos, which means like connecting to Hashem all the time, 7 days of not being involved in the world, not working, not creating, then they're missing the whole point. Shabbos is Shabbos because it follows the 6 days of creation, right? Like the Rizal shows like the deeper significance of making a 6 braided challah is like braiding together and weaving together the work and the creation that we've done for 6 days, and now bringing it together into this like beautiful and melding everything together on Shabbos. So the week in Shabbos is a pause. It's a stop. It's a pause from anything creative to just be. And we have an ascension to be godlike and to ascend and to have a time of connection. So we're no longer creating. We're just being. It's a much more feminine space, right? Because it's in a keva. Feminine is being, masculine is creating. It's projecting outwards. It's going out and conquering. And feminine, and especially in, we learn in the forming of a human being and creation of a baby, of a human, the man is the one that is actively creating and the woman just receives it, right? She is just in what is, she's been receiving. What? Just, sorry, thank you for correcting me. The woman's act is more in connection, in the receiving and in the connecting. So Shabbos is a space, is carving out, and all the don'ts on Shabbos. It's like, well, Shabbos is about like rest, but there's so many things you can't do on Shabbos. You have to do these things. All of those laws are really just to create a space and to make a space where it's possible to connect more, connect with our neshama, connect with our inner essence, connect with Hashem, connect with our family and friends. The meals and all the things around it are to make sure that we have this time and space. Because if we were just resting in bed all day or just watching TV all day, right, then it could be a day of rest, but it's not Shabbos. So it's not just relaxing. It's not a break. It's not a weekend. Shabbos is an intentional time to be within, to be in the feminine space of receiving and connecting and connection and connecting to all the worlds to each other and bringing together and fusing all the things that we do all week. It's an elevation. But at the same time, even though Shabbos is so sublime, it's not what we're here in this world for. And that's why it's only once every 7 days, right? And it's not all the days. Because if all the days are Shabbos, that's what Mashiach is, right? Mashiach, it says, Yom Shekulo Shabbos Umnucha. Right, we say when Mashiach comes, it's going to be a day that's kulo Shabbos, always Shabbos. We have to earn that, right? And our voda in this world that Hashem made is an intentionally for us to build, to construct. That's the voda of the Mishkan, right? So we actually learn a third layer. So first layer is how to build the Mishkan of the instructions. Second layer is what not to do on Shabbos. And from what not to do on Shabbos, we also learn what we should be doing the other 6 days, which is creation, which is acts of constructive creation. And we learned that even though the building of the Mishkan only took the span of a couple of months, if I'm not mistaken, we still continue to build the Mishkan the rest of the 6 days of creation. So he's saying 6 days, you should do all these malacha for the rest of your life. Every 6-day unit, you are creating. What does that mean? That we're modeling just like how they built the Mishkan, and they donated all of their wealth and all of their skills, and the same thing we do in our life. Hashem tasked all of us to spend 6 days, not just separating from the world. Hashem didn't put us in a physical world, in a physical body to be distant from it and to just be in our books all day learning Torah, and rather Hashem sent us in this world to affect the world, to deal with the physical world, to elevate it, to work with the materials of the world and utilize the physical to make it bring spirituality and divinity into it. And the way we do that is just like they did in the Mishkan. We find every person donated all of the gifts and skills that they had. And Hashem gives each one of us unique skills so different from one another and so unique and so different. And each one of us is supposed to find our skills and utilize and use those to make the world lighter, to make the world bring more kedusha in the world, to bring more holiness, but to create, to go out and do, not just to remain in the spiritual, but to use the physical things that we have, to physically use them to make a home for Hashem. That's why Hashem wants us to earn. Hashem could have given us everything we need and we didn't have to work for it. Hashem could have also made the Mishkan come down from heaven. He didn't need us to do it. But the beauty of why Hashem made the world is specifically that we have a home for Hashem in the physical, that we can fuse these two, and that's where Hashem gets pleasure. When we're a human being in a physical body that struggles, but yet we find the light, we go inside, we see what skills Hashem gave us, we see what gifts Hashem gave us. It doesn't have to be a skill to weave or to sew, but it says the women who were skilled in weaving, they weave for the Mishkan. The women who were people who are skilled with whatever it is, instructing, leadership, right? We can be leaders, we can be speakers, we can be teachers, we can be nurturers, we can be carers. We have so many unique gifts, right? We can be We can be people helping psychologists, right? We can have this gift to understand people and understand the human brain. We can help make the world a lighter place with whatever Hashem gave us. And also with the materialistic things in our possessions, whatever materialistic things we have. We're not supposed to live a life where we have the smallest home and the bare minimum. We're supposed to see all the wealth and the things Hashem gave us, that we're supposed to use that and give that back to Hashem. Meaning we take this home that we have and we make it into a home that gives that welcomes people in, a home that reflects light, a home that does chesed, a home that people know that they're welcome to come into, a home that expresses kedusha and Torah and light. So we're supposed to take all the physical material things we have, just like they did in the Mishkan, and they donated it to make a home for Hashem. We too go use all the. We don't take away the physical things in our life. We see how we can use every physical thing that comes into contact with us to make it something spiritual, to make it holy, right? We take every physical being and every encounter and make that into a home for Hashem. So that is the third layer of the many deep layers of the instructions of these 39 malachos. These are ways that you can also make your own Mishkan in your own life, in your heart, in your soul, in your home, right? In your relationships for Hashem. Okay. There's so many more things I wanted to done, but okay. Let me just one more thing, because the next pasuk, the third, we're really only on the third pasuk of the parsha. But lo tavaru eish b'chol mishvosechem b'yom Shabbos is actually interesting, because the isser of lighting a fire in Shabbos from the Torah is only if the fire is constructive. If you're just lighting a fire to burn down an ugly wooden desk that you don't like anymore, to burn something, that's not asur in Shabbos. It's because creative, if you're burning something to use the ashes, or if you're burning to create a fire to cook, right? If you're burning it for the purpose of creating, even if it's just to use the ashes or to use the smell for a purpose, but if the purpose is just to cause destruction or to take away something, that's not asur in Shabbos min Torah. Then later the Chachamim added it in as a rabbinical prohibition. But the actual isur is only just to light a fire for the act of creating something new, for something productive. And we actually learned that fire is a metaphor for inspiration, right? Because when we're on fire, so if the Torah in our life, if the holiness in our life remains spiritual, if somebody comes to this class and you're just getting the high and the inspiration and you're tavaru eish, right? And it doesn't lead to something constructive to come out from it. If it doesn't affect you in your practical life, in the way that you are in being in affecting your physical body or your emotions, or making you a better person in some way, then it's not actually an act of construction. It wouldn't even be considered. It's not actually a malacha, meaning it's not creative work. It's not a malacha. We need to do constructive work. And I love that it says like lo tivaru eish. It's a specific, the wordage, the wording of it is actually speaking about a fire that's creative. So any type of inspiration is only purposeful if it leads to action. And that's why it says, Haomer ainli ela Torah, afilu Torah ein lo. That someone who says all I have is Torah, he doesn't even have Torah. Because if your Torah is just to remain learning Torah all day and not to bring it out into action, there's no point to your Torah. The whole point of Torah is that it's instruction. Torah is from the word hora, instruction. It's inspiration to instruct us in our life. So someone says, I just want to learn Torah. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. It's so inspiring. And that's where I end. Then he has nothing. That's pointless. You don't have instructions if you're not going to utilize it, right? It's like going to a parenting class and you're so inspired, but then it doesn't change you in any way or change your relationship within yourself even at all, right? If it doesn't affect you, then you have nothing. So that is why like Shabbos can only come after the 6 days of work. The end of this part. Okay, because I could talk so much more about this. Okay, so now we're going to get into the question that we asked a little bit, and they're very connected. This is not different. But now we're going back to the repetition that we said in the part that was cut off. So I'll repeat very quickly that these two parshios seem very extra. It seems like it could have been, the question asked is that these two parshios, Vayakhel-Pekudei, that are this week's parsha, could have been literally replaced with one sentence. And Moshe told Bnei Israel everything that Hashem told him, right? Didn't have to, it's like me telling you a story and then telling you again what I told. It's like this happened to me and then I told him and then I'm repeating it all again. I just said, and then I told him everything that happened. It doesn't need to be repeated verbatim, word for word, all over again, seemingly. So this is a huge question, especially because the Torah is so particular about adding even one letter. And here we have two parshios, right? So what is the meaning of this? So we learned something phenomenal. Ready? Okay. By the way, all these are in your beautiful source sheets. Then he goes, right, so it goes into detail all over again. What is the meaning for this? So we learn that, in fact, it's not a repetition of the same Mishkan. All the instructions that Hashem gave to Moshe on Har Sinai were instructions for two different Mishkans that existed. There was a Mishkan above and a Mishkan below. And it's not just semantics. They're actually two different Mishkans. There's a spiritual abstract Mishkan. It says that Hashem showed him the form. The words are, I think this is in your sources. I at least have it in my form of how he should make the whole Mishkan. So the Mishkan that Hashem instructed Moshe Rabbeinu to make and told him all the details about was about the Mishkan above. So we learn from Kabbalah that every single physical thing on this world has a parallel above, that everything that we see below is a physical manifestation of a spiritual counterpart. That everything, every cup down here has a spiritual counterpart above of a keli and a vessel above. Our bodies are image, just like our bodies are made in the mirror image of Hashem, right? There is man above. It says Adam Kadmon. There's the form of man above, and we are made in the image of God. We are literally the physical manifestation of the 10 spheros of Hashem. We are made in the image of Hashem's spheros. Everything physical, Kabbalah tells us, and actually the word Kabbalah, besides for meaning to receive because it was received, it actually also has the same shorish as makbil. In Hebrew, makbil means parallel. So there's parallel, people who are like into sci-fi and parallel universes, we learn from Kabbalah that Kabbalah teaches us that there's actually a parallel universe, that everything that exists here physically has there's a parallel universe above. And Kabbalah, differently than Chassidus, mainly tells us what's happening above when things are happening below. For example, it says when Yaakov kissed Rachel in the parallel universe above, Yaakov is actually a physical manifestation of the sphere of Tiferes, and Rachel is Malchus, and it's Tiferes and Malchus uniting above. So even down here, it manifests as Yaakov kissing Rachel, but above, what happened was that he caused unification of this two spheres of God, Malchus and Tiferes, whatever that means, right? Chassidus says, okay, that's great, but how does that? Kabbalah focuses on how what we do affects what goes on above, and Chassidus focuses more on the opposite, on what goes down, on how what goes on bringing it back down into our bodies, on more on the parallel of what goes on above it happens in our microcosm of our body. So, for example, what Chassidus will tell us that the Mishkan, which is what goes down below, is even paralleled. Everything that happens in this world and above is paralleled in the everyday journeys of our lives. So like Yaakov going down to Haran represents our soul. Chassidus will tell us represents not Malchus traveling from this sphere to that sphere, but rather it represents the journey of our soul, every single one of us traveling from heaven into our bodies, going down from its source in Shemayim, from Be'er Sheva, which means represents heaven, Charan, which means Charan af Olam, into this descent into the physical world, and how our inner experience mirrors, right? Rivka pregnant with twins mirrors each one of us being pregnant with two different souls, right? Which we're going to get to very soon in the Tanya course. So Kabbalah focuses on the parallels above, and Chassidus focuses on the parallels universe within. So there's a lot of parallel universes going on. There's a lot of things and layers to everything that's going on in the world. So why am I teaching this? Because now we're focusing on the parallel above. So the Mishkan that Hashem described to Moshe in detail was about the Mishkan above, in the alternate universe, the parallel universe above, in its form, in an abstract form of the Mishkan. And the Mishkan that Moshe told to the Jewish people is supposed to be made in that image, but it's a completely different Mishkan. There is actually a spiritual Mishkan that exists in its abstract form. Spirituality is something real. We just can't see it visually, but it has form. It takes up form. It has concept, right? Spiritual things exist. Love is spiritual. We don't see it, but it's real, right? So there's a Mishkan above, and the Mishkan that Hashem relayed to Moshe, that Moshe relayed to the Jewish people, is to take model of physical Mishkan in this world, fashion it based on the abstract Mishkan that was fashioned above by Moshe Rabbeinu, right? By Hashem, by Moshe Rabbeinu and Hashem. So they made this Mishkan above. Now, this we see in many different areas in the Torah. For example, there's two Gan Edens. There's Gan Eden L'mayla and Gan Eden L'mata. The Gan Eden L'mata in this world was a Gan Eden. We don't know where it is, but it's an actual garden that Adam and Chava were in, frolicking in, right? And Gan Eden above is the one that the souls ascend to after they pass. A soul, right? A righteous soul ascends and goes to Gan Eden. There are two different places. They're parallel. One is parallel to the other one. They're like aligned, spiritually and physically aligned. One is a physical space, and it parallels and has a lot of similarities to the one above, but they're different. For example, the other one is Yerushalayim. It says Yerushalayim below and Yerushalayim above. Beis Hamikdash below, Beis Hamikdash above. They're not just an idea and then it being drawn down. It's actually something as a spiritual counterpart and a physical counterpart. Now, this is really cool, right? We're talking about parallel universes, right? Now we understand. So now we can somewhat answer. That's how Kabbalah explains that the instructions are repeated because it's a different Mishkan. There's two Mishkans. There's a Mishkan L'mayla and Mishkan L'mata. The Mishkan, what?
If it's the same description.
Okay, great. We're going to get to that, right? Bilvavi Mishkan Evne, right? It says Bilvavi Mishkan Evne. I'm going to make a Mishkan in my heart. But still, we're left with the question, right? Lisa has this question. Most of us still say, but nevertheless, if the wordage is, if it's so similar, and we're supposed to make the physical one parallel to the one above, then maybe we could have just replaced it. Instead of saying, and Moshe told the Bnei Israel to do all that Hashem had instructed him, maybe we could have replaced it, and Moshe instructed the Jewish people, and they built a physical representation, a physical Mishkan, paralleling the details that Hashem told Moshe about the Mishkan above, right? Could have still been summarized and saying that they made a physical version of the spiritual version of the Mishkan, of the abstract version of the Mishkan. It still didn't have to repeat all the details and say, and the Bnei Israel, it doesn't actually repeat, like I said, Moshe repeating it to Bnei Israel. It repeats the Bnei Israel carrying out. It says, and this is what they did. And they said, Moshe telling them to do all this. And a lot of it is what they did. And then they built this, and then they made this, and these are the measurements, etc. Right? So we're still left with the question, why does the Torah add so many extra words to go into detail, again, which it could have just said, and they made a physical manifestation of the Mishkan. Now, to understand this, I heard a beautiful teaching from Yossi Jacobson, and a beautiful explanation from none other than a Greek philosopher named Plato, right? Plato had a theory on creation that is very similar to this concept. Plato's theory on the universe, Plato's was like many Greek philosophers were looking for the truth in the world. They were truth seekers. Philosophers were looking for the truest philosophy that can explain the universe. And in Plato's search for truth, he discovered, and conclusion he came into is that something that is, we speak about in Chassidus all the time, very, very similar. That truth that is the unchanging, this is it, truth is the unchanging universal form that is always the sum. Okay, this is fancy words, right? In our world, there's many deformities, there's many distortions of what truth is. The truth of something is its abstract form of it. For example, the example he gives, a tree. He says a tree all look so different, and they're distorted, and some trees are messed up, right? And some are beautiful and perfect. What makes the tree perfection? What's perfection? What's the truth of the tree? He says, even though there's so many different types and colors and shapes and distorted trees in this world, there is a universal form that all trees have, that they all have a trunk, they all have roots, and they all have branches, and some of them have leaves, right? That abstract form of the idea of the concept of the abstract form of a tree, that is the truth and perfection of a tree. As the abstract comes down into this world, and the world full of lies, then it begins to take on distortions. And so as it comes down here, all those distortions are not truth. The truth of what the emes, the purity, the pure form of the tree, and just what it is in this pure form, that's its truth. Everything else is the distortions, right? We see this in Chassidus a lot. And we see this, for example, everything has its pure form. For example, there's so many different types of cups. Right? Cups can be so many different shapes and sizes and vessels, but there's the pure form of an abstract idea of what a cup is. The image of a cup, the abstract form of a cup is that it has a bottom and sides, right? Some might have a handle, some might be wider, bigger, but in the abstract form, that's the universal truth that unites all cups. So there's something that universally unites all trees. There's a universal truth that unites all cups. Whatever is universally exactly the same in everything, that is what truth is according to Plato, and everything else is false, it's lies, it's distortions that come from this world of lies, right? We actually see this concept in Chassidus, in the Tanya, in chapter 32, which is Lev, the heart of the Tanya, says something really similar about the human beings, that we're only separated by our bodies. In our core, if you would strip away all the layers, all the physical layers, this is literally what Plato says. If you strip away all the layers, you get to the abstract truth of something, and universal truth in it. And then we say in the same thing that we, obviously, how we could truly love another person is by realizing that any differences of hate for another person or looking down at them is because our bodies separate us. But the truth is at our core, we all have the same soul. Our soul is all similar. We don't have differences. And we see that at the truth of everything, we're all one. We're unified, right? And so if we would get stripped down all the layers, we would see the universal truth that we're all one creation, one being, and then we can have true love. So that seems to be very similar to Plato's theory. So his theory is not incorrect. His theory is solid. It's pretty solid in his theory of universalism. Another way that I see this in one example of the way that I see this in the world is Plato's theory, it became so widely accepted that it is really seeped into and affected the Western culture as we live today, right? And how does it affect us? It affects us without even realizing how much it affects our perception of what is good and what is perfection, right? We look at something and it has to be like the standardized universal way for it to be a perfect tree. That's a perfect tree and that's a disordered tree. And one of the ways that I think it affects our lives the most is in the universal beauty. This concept of a universal standard of beauty exists. I think it stems from Plato's theory of universalism, and it comes to be suddenly that what the universe decides is the standard of beauty in every generation or in every culture and in each culture, part of the world, that becomes the standard of beauty. And everyone assumes that even though beauty can come in all shapes and sizes, what true beauty is like this standard. So it used to be a plump, luscious woman full of curves to show that she's healthy, and that became beautiful. And anything other than that wasn't as beautiful because it has to be the universal idea of what beauty is. And now in the Western form, it's like an hourglass figure, like a Bratz doll, right? Like a Barbie doll that has like a tiny waist, a large top, and a large bottom, and that becomes like the perfection. And we're all trying to reach perfection of beauty. The all universal truth of what beauty is trying to be as close as you are to that universal picture of what a beautiful woman is. And it changes as a generation. It changes. There's trends. Even in the last 20 years, it's trended a little bit. It used to be like sometimes it was tiny, flat, no curves. Then it's curvy, right? And people have to like mold their bodies and get surgery to change with the trend so that their body can fit this universal truth. So although it has truth to it, the source of it, it can also have harmful effects on our perception because yes, there's a universal sum to everything, but who's to say that that is more true or more pure or more perfect than the distortions as it comes down to this world? So it's true. So let's go back to a little bit. This is a theory in Hasidus and Kabbalah that is literally almost the same as Plato's theory, but the conclusions that he came to are different. So the theories are almost identical, but the conclusions that we draw from it, that he drew from it, and that we draw from it are actually like opposites. So let me talk about the theory a little bit. The theory of Hasidus is, and I mentioned this at length in other classes, and we will talk about it more in Tanya class, but in short, is that there's an inherent gap, that there's a big gap there's a big gap in this world that exists between our ideals of how things should be and then how they turn out to be. Right? How we want things to be and how they actually are. How we picture them and how they are. For example, I always say marriage. How we picture marriage being holding hands, looking down into your eyes, walking down into the sunset together, preferring marriage, and how marriage actually is, which is the day-to-day living and struggles and love and, the roller coaster of marriage and, the whole relationship. So in life, there's an inherent gap between how things are above and then how they are, and how they are below is very distorted. And there's a big gap between how things are idealistically. And I call this the hay theory, right? So the Plato theory in Kabbalah and Chassidus, you've heard this year, and it's going to come up soon for Pesach. So we're going to talk about it because the hay theory is that the whole world was created with the letter hay, because it says, Ela toldo shamayim ba'aretz behi baram, and chamim of Gemara say behe baram. The whole world was created with hay, and hay teaches us that there's the line on top is the concept, and we can draw that down into our speech and articulate how our ideals and how we want to be, and the perfect mom I want to be. And I want to be this mom that always greets my kids with a hug and a kiss and a clean house and cookies and milk. And I'm always happy and like never angry and never yelling at them. But then to draw that down into the action, so the 3 lines of the hay represent thought, speech. I can say it, I can communicate it to you, I just did. But then to draw that down into action, it's never going to happen that way because Hashem made the world with a gap, intentional gap between the ideas, and we're going to talk about this more because I'm giving you a huge concept on one hopping foot with the hay. So that said, this Platonic concept, it's actually called, so when we say the word Platonic, right, what does Platonic mean? Usually we use it to mean a relationship. What does it mean, a Platonic relationship? Something that hasn't materialized. The word Platonic means a relationship that remains an abstract. It's like we don't actually have, it hasn't materialized into a physical relationship. We're just Platonic friends. We say we're just friends, we're Platonic, we're not physical. But what it really means is Platonic. It remains in the theory. And so Platonic is not only used about a relationship that hasn't materialized and hasn't actualized, it remains like in your wishes and doesn't actually become physical. Platonic, the second definition in the dictionary, Platonic is of or associated with the Greek philosopher Plato and his ideas, readers of the Platonic dialogues, and not even to do with relationships. Confined, the second definition is when you say something is Platonic, it's confined to words, theories, or ideals, and not leading to practical action, a Platonic gesture. It is just an idea, but it doesn't lead to any action, right? That's what we've been saying this whole time, right? That it's what we have to, that's something that remains like spiritual Shabbos, where it doesn't lead to physical action, right? So this idea of remaining in ideals, that there's a big gap between the ideals and then how it's drawn down into the physical world is Plato's theory. Now, here is where we differ. So we agree that there is a big gap, that things are above are perfect. And also we agree that things as they are above are perfect. Our picture and ideals, the person I want to be, that's better, right? The mom I want to be is much better, much more perfect than the mom that I am, the mom that we get. How we want our life to go is much more perfect and idealistic than how it actually goes. So we also agree with Plato that it's more perfect above, that the image in its abstract is much more perfect, it's much more pure, it's much more universal, and as it comes down below is distorted. Here's where we disagree with Plato, right? Here's where we disagree. His conclusion was that he rejected the physical manifestation because it's not true and it's imperfect and it's distorted. And our conclusion is the exact opposite. Yeah, ready for it? Our Hashem's conclusion is the exact opposite. And this is where we get back to the Mishkan. Hashem's conclusion is that yes, above, the Mishkan above is perfect and it's idealism and it's made by the hand of God and Moshe and it's perfect and it's untouchable and it's pure and it's wholesome and it's universal and it's pure and true. And the one down below that's made by you guys, that is not a perfect Mishkan. That's a Mishkan made with gold and silver, and with gold that was used, the same gold that was used for the Chet Egel, for the golden calf. We actually learn that Hashem only commanded the men to bring the gold, and the women also gave, because in the commandment it says in the masculine form, because the men did it as a kapara for the sin that they gave. So they so quickly gave their gold for the golden calf in last week's parsha, Kisisa, and the women did not give their gold. And here the men have the opportunity to do real teshuvah. Real teshuvah is not crying and feeling guilty and saying I'm a bad person, right? Real teshuvah is being faced with a similar situation, acting differently this time. It's I have the same challenge that I had last time. Teshuvah is when someone does something wrong and now he's faced with the same temptation. This time he doesn't do it. This time he overcomes it. That's when teshuvah is real. Now here they have this opportunity to give their gold to Hashem, and they're even faster and more eager to give all their gold for the holy thing and not to give it for the golden calf. This Mishkan is not made of pure, untouchable, godly things. It's made of physical things touched by sin, touched by man. Not only that, but do you know what gold and jewelry the women gave? In this week's parsha, it says, Vayavo hanashim al hanashim, on the women. The men came in addition to the women because the women didn't have to come. What does al hanashim mean, on the women, right? That we learned from this that the women took the jewelry that was on their body and took it off of their bodies. They were wearing jewelry. Now, first of all, this is so amazing, because imagine taking the jewelry that you wear is your favorite jewelry, and the jewelry that we have now is bought from a store. The jewelry that they had then, there was no store that made a brand of jewelry. Jewelry that they had was custom made for them. There was no stores that sold like the same thing. Everything was custom made. It was their own beautiful jewelry, and they took it off their bodies to give for the Mishkan. And one of the jewelry pieces given, Rashi says, it's in the Torah, it says akumas. It says, it lists the jewelry. One is akumas. Rashi says kumas is genital jewelry. It was adornments that they used over the genitalia. Kumas, and he brings down, the Chachamim say the kumas is an acronym for kan makom zima. Here is a place of licentiousness, lust, right? Here is a place of zima, of lust. They took genital pieces off their bodies and used it for the Mishkan, right? That's very different and less perfect, like Plato would say. This is a distortion of the Mishkan above. The Mishkan above is perfect. The one below is a distorted Mishkan. It's not perfect. It's made by flawed human beings who have just sinned, it comes off of your bodies, things that was used for very physical, not pure things. And yet, so fine, so we get that. And yet, which is the Mishkan? This is the punchline, everyone. The punchline is that which is the Mishkan that Hashem chooses to put a Shekhinah in? Not the Mishkan above, not the one that Plato would idealize and say that's pure, and the one below is that has this big gap. So the Mishkan below has a big gap. And yet the one that Hashem chooses to rest his Shekhinah in, the one that he wants to be in, put his Shekhinah in and his essence in, is the Mishkan below. And we see that at the climax, at the end of the parsha, it says that Hashem rested in, Moshe erected, and Hashem's Shekhinah rested in this Mishkan. And in the Mishkan above, there isn't Hashem's Shekhinah, Hashem's essence. We learn that in the world above, Hashem only gives, Kabbalah tells us, a emanation of his light, but his essence comes down here, right? It could be like I have my primary home, and then I have my vacation homes. So the world above are Hashem's vacation summer homes, right? Where he visits infrequently. He's there. Hashem is everywhere, right? But where is Hashem's essence? Where is Hashem's desire, deepest desire to be? He's here. This is where Hashem is primarily. And we also have brought down by Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo avo, tell me if you've heard this, Amar HaKadosh, Rabbi Yochanan says, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's even a song about it, Lo avo, right? Yerushalayim shel Maila, Ad she'avo, Yerushalayim shel Mata. That even when we were exiled from Yerushalayim, Hashem said, I'm not going to go in the abstract Yerushalayim that's above, in this alternate universe, in this alternate Kabbalistic world of spiritual forms and angels. There's another Yerushalayim there. And Hashem says, I'm not going to go there until I can be in the Yerushalayim below. Even though the Yerushalayim below is full of, not perfection, this is where I want to be. Now, why, right? So this is what we learned. So now we see Plato's conclusion was that let's reject the physical for the pure, which makes sense, right? He seems to be on the right track. Let's reject the physical for the pure. And while that applies sometimes, for example, in Ahavas Yisrael, let's reject the differences and distortions in a person's body that doesn't seem perfect for the universal truth is that this person is a beautiful, shining soul. And we can look past the differences. The ultimate truth, that we can use that theory for the good also, right? Like everything physical. Ultimately, though, his conclusion that the higher worlds, although it's more perfect, is the ultimate is exactly the opposite from what Hashem concludes in the Torah. Hashem says, yes, the higher worlds are perfect, but that's not my home that I want to be in. I want to be in the home below. Why? And I heard a beautiful mashal from Malka Fleischer of Efrat Shout out to Malka many years ago, and I always repeat it, that what's more precious to you? We're all of us here are moms, right? What's more precious? And if you're watching, you're not a mom. If you're in a relationship, what's more precious to you? A perfect Hallmark card that is gorgeous, or a scribble from your child, but backwards written, "Happy birthday, I love you, mom," with spelling mistakes, right? You keep that forever. All those written that I could barely read what my son wrote with complete spelling mistakes. You know how precious that is? Why? It's not true. It's not perfect. It's a huge distortion of what the true perfect birthday card is. You might have even been trying to copy, right? You write happy birthday and then they try copying it and somehow it comes back like they just look, right? And happies and love yous. And we would say, who cares? What's actually precious, what I want to keep, what matters to me, where I want to be, what I want to keep and not throw right in the garbage is the distorted version, is the imperfectly one, because it's him. It's his essence. He created it, right? And an example, the Rebbe actually gave a similar story in that a man came to the Rebbe and said, "What's the point of this, of my life? I'm struggling so much. I'm living my entire life overcoming. I'm never getting anywhere, right? I'm always going to be, I'm never going to be a tzaddik. I'm struggling. I'm having the same struggles over and over again. I'm back where I started. I feel like I'm this imperfect, flawed person, and I'm working on myself, and I'm never going to be a tzaddik. I'm just going to be a flawed person who messes up over and over again. I feel like it's pointless. It's tiresome, right? A lot of times I feel the same way. Like I'm back where I started. I'm working so hard to be more on time, and then I'm at the share, and again I start half an hour late, right? It's like, what's the point? It feels so frustrating. It feels so upsetting." And the Rebbe told him, and this is so beautiful. He said, he was a photographer. He was an artist. He said, "What's more valuable? A photograph, for example, of you or a painting of you, right? What costs more?" And he says, "Well, obviously the painting." He says, "Well, why? A photograph is exactly like you, and the painting is never, even the best photographer can't make the exact painting of you. Even an abstract picture, right? We have an abstract picture in my house of the Rebbe that's like completely abstract. That is a very expensive original piece in my parents' house. And the photograph of the Rebbe is so much more real." Well, he says, "Well, Rebbe, you're paying, the value is not in how replicated look, it's in every stroke of the artist, is the artist's expression, the feeling, the emotion, right?" And the Rebbe says, exactly. Right? Our job in this world is not to be a perfect photograph. We are in the image of Hashem, but we're not a photograph of Hashem. Our job in this world is not to be the perfect photograph, not to be a photocopied Hallmark card, even though it's more pretty. Our job, what's precious to Hashem, is not that you give him the exact replica. What's precious to Hashem is in your abstract, I'm using the word abstract, in your painting, in your scribble, right? Your scribble, because it's yours, because your feeling, your emotion, your intention, everything comes out in that masterpiece. And that's what's valuable, right? Some of the greatest artwork looks nothing like the original, right? Like, who's that? What's his name? Who's that Van Gogh that has like the abstract, all the abstract faces? It's I don't know. I think so. Anyways, all the abstract things, right? That's not reality, but it's the beauty. It's how he sees the world. It's his perspective. It's not true. So Plato would reject that, say, no, make the universal truth of how everything should look in its perfection as a photograph copy. But we say, Hashem says, that's not what's precious to me, right? What's precious to me is the handwritten card. It's my lover's handwritten note, even though, he might not have the most beautiful handwriting. Sometimes I can't really read it. And he has to tell me what it says, right? That's what's beautiful to me. That's what's way more precious to me than the most beautiful poem written by the famous poet. If my husband would print me a poem on a gorgeous framed thing, or write me his own poem that says, that's maybe not the handwriting that's as beautiful or not as, worth as, but not going to be published in the newspaper. Obviously, it goes without saying that what's more precious to me is the physical, distorted manifestation of trying to reach our goals. And that's where we have in this week's parsha. And that's why Hashem adds an extra few hundred words in the Torah to drive that home to us and to say that it's worth a few hundred words for you to know that your work, even though it's not going to be an exact replica, your work in this world, even though it's not going to be perfect in like it is in its ideal form, like how I said it, is so precious to me enough that each word is valuable. And I'm going to rewrite it for you to know this, that it needs to be you. It should be your avoda. It doesn't have to be pure gold that comes from heaven. It should be your gold that you toiled and sweated for, then something that you use in your home, that you shouldn't make perfect, that our lives for Hashem shouldn't be a perfect spiritual life where we're in the shul all day. It should be living a physical life in our physical homes and bringing Hashem here into our homes, into our day-to-day routines, not living a life of Shabbos. Thank you so much for joining. If there's anything I missed, let me know. And I give all of us a bracha that we should, as much as possible, have a life and a marriage and a home and the being that mirrors as much of the ideals as possible, that it's as glorious and light-filled as possible. and that we should know that our effort is so important. And even when we are not the mom we wish we were, that's so special to our children because they don't want the perfect mom, they want you. Right. And we don't need to have the perfect marriage. It has to be your marriage. It doesn't have to be like everyone else's. Even though you might look and say, I want the vacations, I want that perfect home that everyone is seeing. That's not what you want. You want your relationship, right? You want yours. It has to be yours. It doesn't have to be perfect. L'chaim, thank you so much for joining.
Children who were brought up by